Yes, good morning. Welcome back. I've told you we'll be joining Abraham Sako and Stephanie Ayeta live from Connected Africa Summit. So I just, of course, the theme is being Uniting Africa's Innovation for an Inclusive Digital Market, with the agenda, the 2026 Agenda Blueprint being this year's Agenda Blueprint is built around the African Union's digital transformation strategy for Africa 2020 to 2030 pillars, policy, also regulations, infrastructure, skills, innovation, and the continent's big conversation on trade, innovation, and development. So to get this more, this information and more, I just want to give it to our very own Stephanie Ayeta. So Stephanie Ayeta, good morning.
Coming to us. Very much, James, and as you have rightly put it, we are right here at Connected Africa Summit 2020. This is the fifth summit that is being hosted, and not alone. I'm joined by the amazing Brand Sako. Brand Sako, how are you today?
Steph.
Good morning.
I'm excited though. Yesterday you were here and I know great things happened.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm glad that you're here to ensure that we cover the show right here on ground. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is why in the morning we're so excited. Stick around and stand by for interesting conversations to be lined up for you, including guests that I know we have. Steph, you were here yesterday.
Absolutely.
There's a lot to get to. Pardon my influencer, but please, just brief me, a little overview. What exactly went down? I understand it's conversations around tech, but there's a lot to get to. AI, cybersecurity, data, and so much more. What happened yesterday in your coverage?
Yes, so yesterday we were here. Yesterday was the event officially began yesterday, but today we'll be having the opening of the event. Right. So yesterday we had different dignitaries coming here. We have different stakeholders coming on board, and the conversations were, mostly around cybersecurity, looking at how do we ensure that we can trust, the people who handle our data. How can Kenyans entrust them? Even the governments, how can they trust the data handlers? And that's why we had a conversation. We had a link with you with a guest from ITU. So ITU is a UN agency, and they usually deal with digital telecommunications. So we find that companies like Safaricom are under ITU, right? So they were looking into issues such as data security, looking at digital sovereignty. So how do we ensure that our data is actually ours? Ni kama mtu ako na data ya sako na hawezi pata,
Ownership.
Yeah, the ownership of data. Right. So you can own it, but at some point, due to one reason or the other, if you're not able to meet the standards or something, or payment, they would say you cannot access your data. So that's a problem, because
that locks you out as a participant.
Exactly.
And as an actor.
Because it's your data at the end of the day.
No.
So such conversations like that, and around cybersecurity, matters of trust. So those are some of the things that we were looking into.
Interesting. And I love the fact that the theme is Uniting Africa's Innovation for an Inclusive Digital Market. I understand it has over 1,000 plus, let's say, delegates that are expected to actually be part of this conversation as it pans out to Thursday. Yeah. So I believe there's so much to get into. And also, like I said, when it comes to us having, like you've mentioned an interesting one, having access to our own data, I believe that it gets to a place as well where we have to localize it. And regionally as Africa, how are we opening ourselves to our neighbors, like South Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, so that we share a common, let's say, like a data regional data center, exactly. But also within the pressings and the policies of ethics and security. And I believe that's why cybersecurity will come in, and also data management, privacy, and so much more. So an interesting conversation to look out for here.
Absolutely, and the solutions, because for most of these talks, people usually say, it's just going to be talk of policy, but the implementation is a problem. So in this particular summit, we are really looking at the real impact. How will the implementation be like? And one of the guests, as I said before, from ITU mentioned that open source technology is a solution for us to get to digital sovereignty, even for the government. So is it something that the government is adopting? And open source technology is something that we are using even us on our phones. As if you have an Android phone like
So long as you
like
have a
me,
smartphone,
you
you're
have
using
an
data.
open source technology.
Yeah.
So this is some of the solutions. So how do we completely move to that technology, the open source technology that is being developed by Linux, and so on, and then comes matters to do with AI, which we might be looking at today. Just looking at the program today, there's a lot to do with AI, and as you've said, how do we localize it to suit Africa? Because most of the AI that we use has been developed
foreign, the biggest is
abroad.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I'm imagining if we had for example, I'm Luo Kisi. We have a Luo AI that can be able to interpret, prompts to, let's say like an octogenarian or even a young kid in the interior. How is it accessible? And then also, I believe when it comes to matters AI, it's about infrastructure. Do we have the autonomy to develop our own AI that can take us through or compete effectively with like the ChatGPTs, the Geminis and the rest? I hear the reason why there's been a little bit of lagging is because maybe most of us developing countries, we need a lot of electricity, we need a lot of resources. So also funding comes into play. Resources that include data centers and cloud. So it needs to be developed so that we have such an autonomy that we can, proudly say, you know what, we have Steph AI, we have Sakwa AI, we have Kenya AI, Nairobi AI, that can incorporate machine learning, health, and so much more. So it's interesting.
It's interesting. But interestingly enough, you'd find that we have innovators, because at the center of this theme is also the innovation. So we have Kenyan innovators who have come up with, chatbots. I know of one.
You've interviewed
I've interviewed one who has a very interesting AI chatbot that can be able to translate Luo, what you've just said, to Swahili,
like
to English, so if you're talking with someone who doesn't really, or you're talking to your parents and you just want to talk in Swahili, and then the AI does it for you in Kikuyu, it does that.
So it's localized, actually.
It is there. The problem is they do not know how to scale up. As you've said, funding is a problem. So how do they really get to the market? How do they penetrate into the market? Unless they have partnership with the big tech like Safaricom, Huawei, who are here in this room. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to them. Also, even when it comes to the data center, I know we'll be having an interview with a representative from Konza Technopolis,
from Cisco, believe in Huawei,
Absolutely.
And data is actually like the greatest currency in this tech utopia, because you can imagine, Steph, if all of us had LLMs, and these LLMs are not secure for us, and then it looks like we don't even have the back end. Our back end is international and it's best somewhere in the United States. Like you've said in the beginning, it locks us out of accessibility. So when we own the data centers, it means we have autonomy of data. And like we said, from now on, moving forward, the future is super tech. It's going to be some sort of like a tech utopia. And I believe that's going to set us into like a jet space of scaling into us owning our rights as Africa and getting into international spaces too as well. I can only imagine if you had an LLM that would absolutely compete effectively with like ChatGPT, the Geminis, the Anthropics and the rest. But hapo kwa cloud centers, I think that's where it's a hot spot. Because here we need, I understand we need electricity, because these servers, before I actually forget, I was reading somewhere, it was saying that each time you prompt something on ChatGPT, like 1,000, either a liter of water is lost. And this is because the back-end data centers, are using it to cool the back-end server. So that means we'll have to invest a lot on resource and manpower, electricity. And at some point, I think I remember our president speaking on how he's going to ensure that he sets Kenya to a place where we have enough electricity. So it also talks about electricity production, because these servers are using power too. So probably maybe green energy, green tech energy, and much more.
Absolutely. Those are some of the things that we really need to come out from this particular summit very clearly. How are innovators? Because the young people are wondering, how do we come in You know, how do we come into this conversation? How is the government? Yeah, how is the government really helping us when it comes to opportunities? How do we develop ourselves? So I'm sure the young people want to hear from that, right?
Remember, even also from the theme is uniting Africa's innovation for an
inclusive digital market.
Meaning that there's entrepreneurs in there, there's startups that solely depend on running, like, for example, I think we are calling it digipreneurship, where young people are now fully focused on working online. They prefer selling products online. Initially, you used to have, like, you go to set up a kibanda somewhere. Nowadays, everything is on a mobile phone. So in terms of connectivity as well with the telcos, how is it helping to expand and scale and even, let's say, encourage startups, and as it advances to like SMEs and so much more. So I think it's a big, and then also I believe for the inclusive aspect on the theme is how we accessible to Uganda, how we making it accessible to Tanzania in the digital sphere. So it traps it in that way, yeah.
And the beauty of this conference, this summit, is that we have delegates coming from different countries, you know, and we'll hopefully be having a conversation with them to understand how is, you know, the digital infrastructure on their side. How is the digital, you know, in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, then how can we come together? Because when we're talking about bringing Africa's innovation together for an inclusive digital market, then we need to have our regulations at par or in line. Because if we are restricting this yet they're opening this, it becomes a barrier. Yeah, but there's power in actually us coming together as a continent. We can be able to do so much more, put Africa in the global scale. Let me just take you through some of some of the things, the topics that we're going to look at today, and maybe you can chime in to give your own thoughts. So at 10 a.m. After the opening, we're going to have a high-level dialogue that will be moderated by Julie Gishuru, and it's going to look at DPI as Africa's engine for inclusive digital transformation. So when we talk about DPI, we think of digital IDs, you know. So how is that really going to help people us connect? And people have a bit of reservations when it comes to this, you know.
Remember the Maisha number, Maisha card?
Maisha card. So people had...
It was a little bit controversial and dicey. Yeah, so it's an interesting aspect.
So it's a very interesting one. So we're going to look at how is it really going to help us as Africans. And then it has a whole host of the panelists, and it's a very high, you know, high-end kind of, if I can put it like that, because we're going to have the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi in this panel. We're going to have HE, Mr. Mourana Soma, who is the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy from the Republic of Guinea. And we're going to have HE Dima Al-Yaha, who's the Secretary General Digital Corporation. And away from that, we're also going to have a ministerial panel, and they're going to look at what African governments must decide about AI and who decides it. There's been this talk of now who is really in control when it comes to these technologies. So who is really in control? Who calls the shots?
Big tech now?
Who's you know?
Of course, it's the GPT. I think it's OpenAI, because if you look at how we started consuming artificial intelligence as a country, in Kenya, I believe Kenya contributed a lot to the data tracking in terms of the numbers that were trickling in, especially people Googling stuff, prompting to ask questions. You remember there's there was this trend where people are taking photos. It's like you had to prompt a GPT of what you do. So you prompt it, you write, can you create a photo of what I do professionally? So here apparently they use that to track people's profiles and what they do. So in terms of the back-end data management of it, who is in charge? And I
Who
believe,
is
like
in
you've
charge?
rightly said,
Yeah,
who is
who
calling
owns
the
that?
shots? you know?
Yeah.
Do we have a hand in it here?
Exactly.
So I think that makes sense.
So
Makes sense.
that's what they're going to discuss, and the opening ceremony, AI for Africa from adoption to global leadership. Now Africa is adopting AI. Now how do we become global leaders? Because we have been left behind. You know, we've sort of started adopting AI just recently. So what's going to happen? And in that panel, we're going to have our own Prime Minister, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of ICT and Digital Economy. We're going to have the PS engineer John Tanui, who was also here yesterday, and we're going to have the board chair, ICT Authority, Honorable Lily Ngok, and CEO of ICT Authority, as well as the Honorable Kithure Kindiki, the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. So there's a lot to expect today.
Power-packed panel. So far, so good. Maybe from my anticipation, I'm waiting because this is the 5th summit, right? This is the 5th summit. 15th, no,
Yes,
not
15th.
5th. Yeah.
It's been.
I'm expecting, let's say, like action pointers. Yeah. From here on, this is what we're going to implement on developing our own AI. From here on, this is what we're going to do in terms of the digital IDs. From here on, this is what we are opening our borders to in terms of the telcos. I'd love us to have our own. There's a word in the coding, in the data development. I've forgotten it, but yeah, I'd like us to have so many people that have knowledge of how to manage data, develop data, because data is developed, it's managed, it's processed. So the efficacy that comes into us being professionals. Just recently, was it Meta that fired, I think, 1,000, could be 1,000 plus of employees. Some of the issues that were cited included data and privacy breaches, because also they cited there's people who are able to access that data that have not been ethically trained to access data, especially in the back end for moderation. So are we just setting ourselves there professional? Are we going to see more professionals that have the ethics and the skills of handling and managing data, which is the biggest lucrative currency in this day, age, and time?
The new oil.
Right.
You
And
know?
our development showdown, AI. The race is now for AI superintelligence. It's wired. It's a whole showdown, so to say.
Yeah, it's a lot.
it's a lot.
Now, I think now we can get into our interviews because we have conversations that are coming. We are bringing to you, and the next conversation, Sakwa, I'm going to have with a young person because young people are part of this summit. You know.
Absolutely.
So we look. She's coming from JTL.
Yeah.
Or who do fiber. So how have they enabled us to reach connectivity, digital connectivity? What role is she playing as a young person? What does she expect to see from this conference? So we're going to have Kimberly from ITU coming on board in just a few minutes. And so that's pretty much it. We're going to take a short break and then we'll be right back. Sakwa, maybe you can tell us what to expect on your side.
On my side as well, we'll be speaking to Livingstone Odero. He's a cloud business development manager from Huawei. So expect conversations on data, connectivity, cellular interaction, also how is AI intelligence influencing the operations at Huawei. And then our next guest as well will include Kevin Mugambi. He's the technical solutions architect at Cisco. Cisco is branded as a security guardian of enterprises and governments. So how are they handling matters cybercrime, data efficacy, and internationally as well? What are some of the transitions and tremendous accomplishments that have managed to install in place that make them relevant to this conversation? So stick around for that and much more.
Much more. Yeah. Absolutely. Just to add, we also have a board of member from the ICT Authority, Mr. Savio Wambogo, who's going to talk to us about the opportunities that are there for the young people, among many other guests, even from Konza. So stick with us right here. We take a short break. We'll be right back.